right, everybody. This is the afternoon of DAOs. We got one more DAO conversation for you guys. The State of DAO M&A, hosted by Josh from DAOstar. Please welcome our speakers.
Oh my gosh, it's so bright. I feel they added twice as many lights as they had last year. Man, crypto really is doing well. All right. Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. And we're going to get started super quick, I guess. I'm Josh. I'm co-founder of MetaGov. I think we just had a presentation from some of the other folks in MetaGov just 10 minutes ago. But I'm also a computer scientist and mathematician at DAOstar. Pass it to Jillian.
Hi, I am a financial economist by training. I work as a professor at Emory University, and I also have done a lot about innovators and helping firms get innovation out there and be more inclusive in their innovation process. And I got really excited about DAOs as a potentially very inclusive environment.
Awesome. Hi everyone. I'm Bernard. I'm a co-founder of Areta. We are a crypto-focused investment bank. So we do a lot of M&A transactions, more on the kind of traditional side of equity. I've been the leading bank by deal count globally now. So DAO M&A is a really interesting topic for us as well, looking to the future.
Awesome. So the subject of this talk is a wonderful new report on the state of DAO M&A that we just released, I think, 20 minutes ago. So I think, let me press the button over here so you can actually take a look at it. So just heads up, this is a review copy. It is not the final draft. There may be some changes that are being made, but I think we are very, very proud of the work that we put into this. But maybe as part of this initial conversation, I'll just put out an initial first question to Bernard. What is M&A, and why is it such a big deal?
Let me maybe set the ground a bit. M&A, mergers and acquisition. Historically, it's been a tool, I would say, for companies in capital markets that you can use in a quite versatile manner. So for growth, to expand in specific jurisdictions or markets or products, and in the end, strategically maneuver through the capital markets. It's been a long industry, historically, 100 years old or so, 3 to 4 trillion annual volume, so a bit larger than the crypto market cap. And what it's traditionally being used for, what the main drivers are cases like consolidation. So say in the traditional space, a Disney acquires Fox Network to build out their content and acquire users. Other cases are expansion that you see a lot. So geographically, say an American exchange buys a European exchange to acquire licenses, fast-track the process, or to get access to additional customers. And then on the expansion side, you also see kind of product expansion. So Stripe, for example, I think was the biggest acquisition we've seen in the space for a while, where they acquired a stablecoin product to basically strategically expand in the space. The third category that still I think worthwhile mentioning is acqui-hires, where you basically acquire a smaller team or larger team to grow out your base. And then there are many nuances between those types of acquisitions, but in essence, it's a strategic toolkit.
Thanks, Bernard. Jillian, you've looked at some really big data sets of M&As and DAO M&As in Web3. Could you just give us like a brief overview of what is the, based on your estimation, what is the state of Web3 M&A right now?
Yeah, so this was actually what got me really excited about this project. I, as a financial economist, was, why am I not seeing more consolidation? Every emerging tech industry goes through consolidation, and yet there's this proliferation of coins and proliferation of DAOs. And when I actually stepped back and got the data, and this data was really unique because we went through press releases and Twitter files rather than just looking at traditional ways, because sometimes it's only announced on X. What we found was there's actually been over 1,000 deals so far. So way more than I thought. And also, as he was saying with this like Bridge Stripe deal, that's a $1.1 billion deal. There are some big deals, and I would say that's sort of the big trend that we are seeing. While it might have been slow to start off with M&A in this space, we are sort of ramping up. It is true that typically during up cycles, you see more consolidation, and we're seeing it. While DAO deals in particular still remain relatively small, I'm really optimistic about getting some regulatory certainty here, and with regulatory certainty will come more deals. I think what we've seen, though, in the space so far has really been thinking sort of about the things he was saying. So you're seeing more acquiring developer teams, or you're seeing, I guess another trend that we often see is actually finally this cycle, as opposed to, say, 2021, you didn't see any TradFi players coming in and trying to buy DeFi. We are seeing TradFi players saying, hey, I want to finally get into this space and find me somebody to partner with that seems appropriate. And so I think those trends, like going together and seeking consolidation, are really going to help move the industry forward.
Yeah. So maybe this is a good time to dive into some examples. So Bernard, focusing on DAO M&A now, can you give us a brief overview of some of the DAO M&As that you've seen, or that we've covered, I guess, in our report?
Yeah, of course. And obviously, I think Jillian is the mastermind by now of knowing the whole space and every little transaction that is out there in DAO M&A ever. But certainly, I think the two big ones that come to mind, one is where maybe some folks also in the audience have heard about, was the Ferrari merger already a couple of years back, I think 4 or 5 years back, where Fei, algorithmic stablecoin at the time, acquired Rari, which was a yield aggregator, and that was the first true DAO to DAO merger where you would see a community process attached to it and the community voting for these mergers to also merge the two tokens. All the processes were kind of figured out on the fly, so you would see a lot of heat and discussions on the forum back at the days. And yeah, is an example also where you would see the nascent nature of what those two protocols were trying to achieve, because it ended up also in some legal repercussions. I think there's the processes out there. So I think that was certainly the first big one of true size. Another example of a more, I think, successful one or successful example was the Gnosis and ETHDenver chain merger, also already a couple of years back. So hopefully we see some new precedent soon that I can cite, newer ones. Where basically Gnosis acquired ETHDenver and its stablecoin infrastructure, and out of that Gnosis chain originated. Similar process, the core team decided on it before there was signaling only demanded from the community. And you could certainly kind of see those processes being a bit more mature in a sense, or a bit more successful in the end in its outcome as well.
So I think these are like Ferrari, Gnosis, ETHDenver, some of the very classic, like, this is what a DAO merger or acquisition looks like. There are also some pretty weird examples out there. And we've spent a lot of time talking about, all the varieties between, here's a DAO, here's another DAO, and one got eaten by the other, and now there's like shared governance. And then there's stuff that notionally looks like a merger, it gets called a merger, but is it really? Jillian, I was wondering if you had any thoughts on this. Obviously this kind of relates to some of the stuff we had looked at with Jörn, and how to sort of, stuff out the different versions of an MA that can really show up in this space.
Right. So I think a lot of DAOs, so I'll put this as an example. Arbitrum started a committee, and they were like, oh, we have this money, let's go look and see if we can do some M&A activity. And basically, they came back with the conclusion that, yeah, for strategic reasons, for synergy purposes, it would be a great idea. But actually, we don't quite have the infrastructure in place to do it full out. And so I think what you're seeing out there and what's occurring are sort of smaller pieces that can happen. So I've looked at many of these improvement proposals out there. We've roughly put together a data set with over 20,000 improvement proposals where we looked at probably the maybe top 200 most prominent DAOs. And most of them are DeFi DAOs because I am looking for ones that have a liquid token so you can sort of think about, is there abnormal returns here? And what we were seeing is that actually you're seeing more things that are sort of like a joint venture, or that's the roughly broad category I'll put in them. They have elements of a M&A in them. And so, for example, what you would see is token swaps, right? Two people who may have sort of similar business models but want to diversify would agree to and vote on, switching some tokens, or maybe even taking it a step further and saying, hey, now that you have some of our tokens, would you also come on and vote in ours process and be part of the governance regime? So this is sort of baby steps towards integration. I see it. You can think of other examples that have been out there where it's really about a specific asset. So I'm going to go after you, and I want to actually acquire you mostly because maybe you have an operating license in Singapore, or you have something that I want to be able to run my product. We've also seen really these talent ones. In particular, actually relative to the whole Web3 space, acqui-hires have happened much more in the DAO setting, and I think this is probably because you have so much that you can see with the contributors. And DAOs in particular, one of their challenges is that most people who are contributing, they're not paid employees. They're not in the traditional sense where you have an employment contract, you have a non-compete, and we can value you from a classic M&A perspective as a whole organization. And so instead, we're going out and acquiring these specific talent or team or set of developers. Some other things that we've seen are not necessarily what I would call exactly M&A, but people putting proposals forward saying we should hire this person to do risk management, or we should do something to build out the ecosystem, and we think that that goal would occur by working with this firm. Often these proposals actually don't get much attention. Sometimes they're the ones that are more likely to fail. So sometimes people will even go through processes of trying to incentivize other people in the DAO that they want to work with to maybe, let's give them some benefits in the token and we'll get them on board to actually do this merger. And so you see all these elements getting that way, just the same way you would in equity markets where people are buying up shares ahead of time. And so I think in that sense, they're ready. People want to do it. They just need more clarity on the regulation side for sure.
I honestly thought the acqui-hire point was so interesting, and a really kind of clear way in which some of the these uncertainties, these are regulatory uncertainty, but also these questions about valuation, really do stand in the way of more activity in this sector. And these are very concrete things that we can fix, that we can actually get some progress on. Maybe I'm going to do something a little bit terrible. I personally found the very nerdy discussion of valuation methodologies in the paper extremely interesting. Jillian, I was wondering if you would be willing to share a little bit about that, some of those methodologies, and what you think could work in the future with the audience here.
Sure. So I will put, as a person who has taught corporate finance many times, I will put the hat on that in the paper I went a little deep dive and said, hey, we have 3 methods to valuation. We have discounted cash flow, we have multiples, and then basically market transactions. There's not enough DAO volume right now. You get rid of the market transactions. And then on a multiples basis, look, maybe Aave or people have traditional statements that sort of look like your 10Ks, but most DAOs don't even put out reports, let alone you have a financial analyst who's going to tell you what it looks like. So I don't think that you're really going to be able to come up with a multiples approach, and so that really leaves it at discounted cash flows, and that's also equally challenging, and it's almost even worse, right? Because you have now your weighted average cost of capital, which is what you should discount it at, right? We know equity and debt. Crypto market's super volatile. Arguably, maybe you can put it in some stable coin or something that's equivalent, but I think it's just going to lead to this volatility. And this is one of the interesting things. In the DAO space, we've seen deals close really fast, right? Because you don't want all this uncertainty around the price going forward. If you're going to come up with a solution, I really think that we do need like sort of, more standard metrics for valuing cash flows and thinking them through. And in particular, as wonderful it is that everything's on chain, it's all retrospective. It's not forward-looking, where everything that you need is forward-looking cash flows. And so this brings us to this, nobody knows. If you don't know the value, there's going to be huge idiosyncratic risk there, and people are unwilling to put money down unless it's sort of a booming market where you're already like, well, I'm doing well anyways, I can float it around.
Please read this section. It's actually super interesting. Makes me think, I don't wish I was a finance major, but maybe, just maybe. Bernard, so valuation is definitely one of the big challenges that DAOs face, but there are so many others. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the others you've observed.
Yeah. And maybe also to build up on the valuation point where kind of you could see kind of a general pattern on what is the overall challenge is just the maturity and the lack of processes and precedents. And if you look at the precedents, it's a 2-digit number, and if it goes into valuation, how we do it typically on the equity side, even in crypto, most situations are valued on a comparables method. So you have these sheets where you look at, okay, which transactions have happened recently, how comparable is it, and then you take a multiple of any number you can find, maybe, a financial metric or even a user metric. So this is by large the biggest challenge right now in DAO M&A, because certainly the data set is just so low. And how it typically happens, it goes transaction by transaction, right? So it's hard to establish all these standards in kind of the dry field, if you want to look at it like this. But where it typically gets applied is if there is a situation that people want to spend time on to figure out, with the constraints that we have right now from a regulatory perspective and the governance perspective as well, how can we make it happen? Because there is a vetted interest and we want to make a deal happen, we want to get it done. So with these kind of precedents being worked through one by the other, hopefully more and more, we will also find more clarity on kind of the toolkit of DAO M&A, which is then valuation, on-chain framework, so how decisions on mergers and acquisitions being made, and then thirdly, maybe also how is the community taken by the hand, because when you look at the precedents that we have in the market already, you see a lot of upheaval for any of these transactions, because there's no very clean mechanism so far, and it's always this notion of, okay, this transaction was decided behind the scenes, the DAO wasn't really taken by the hand, now it's being taken to the community, and it's a bit of artificial decision right. And I think all of these things will be figured out over time and need to be figured out over time to get more velocity into DAO M&A.
So Bernard just mentioned the word standards, which is, I'm going to just plug very quickly. So part of this is part of a research report or research series by DAOstar, which is the standards body for the DAO ecosystem. So if you want to solve some of these problems and be on this stage next year, please reach out, go to DAOstar.org, and help us actually build some public goods, write some specifications, put out some standards, so we can actually solve these problems and move forward DAOs and DAO M&A.
And also on that, if I may add to that, we are obviously on the other side of executing these transactions on the equity side, and we were involved in DAO transactions already, but it never came to fruition because we didn't have those standards, right? So we also desperately need kind of your work, and appreciate it a lot that you spend some mind space and time and energy into developing these.
I love you guys. So let's dig into the future. I know the blockchain is about the past, but we're going to peer a little bit in the future, Jillian. And can you tell me, what does the near future look like for DAO M&A? And I'm gonna encourage you to go as crazy as you like.
Are you gonna? I'll go for one. So I think there's been a lot of great conversations this week about DAOs, and it forced me to rethink a lot on governance. And originally, right, you have a corporation and it's typically solving these principal agent problems, and most of the value in M&A deals come from bad management and replacing bad management. And this is the whole reason why we have something called the market for corporate control. It's not exactly the same in the DAO space. And so a lot of my work on governance was saying, like, look, yeah, we want to look at traditional principal agent problems, but we have other aspects like inclusivity or security concerns because there's a lot of risk on chain. What I've been pushed to think about more, though, is adaptability and flexibility. And how do you make the governance agile because we live in an agile on-chain world? And so in the corporate space, you have these supermajority rules, 66% for some M&A deals. I would love to see rules right away that are built in so you could get a deal done quickly and you could have sort of a much more agile structure to assess M&A. And maybe this is having a council of experts that you pull from or a sort of random pool of people in the organization rather than trying to do a whole voting process with all of your members and getting like 50%. I think you want to be able to be much more flexible and much more agile going forward.
What about you, Bernard? What do you think what do we need to do to scale M&A in the future?
What do we need? I mean, it goes into the same direction of what we've discussed already, right? So the toolkit, regulatory certainty, processes, whatsoever. I think what what I could imagine the near future to be the next 2-3 years, that there will be one party picking up a case and proving the value of DAO M&A, and it might be super niche and some type of roll-up case, but some party basically taking the initiative of proving that there is something to be done and then just replicating it over the ecosystem. Because if you look at also the DAO space in general and the different actors within it, it really comes down to, by now, like individuals or individual groups that push this narrative, and I think they will find a way, whoever that may be. I'm excited as well to see who will lead this transition, but they will figure out the way on how to work with the constraints that we have right now from a regulatory perspective, from a mechanics perspective, when there's value on the table and when people are excited to getting deals done.
So I want to throw maybe a wild card here. One of the things that M&A kind of triggers is it's a lot of it is about consolidation in an industry, in a sector, and you might think that consolidation is kind of in opposition to this idea of decentralization that we care a lot about in this space. And you might imagine, and I think it's both a cool and a scary and a super interesting idea, like if M&A actually works, if DAO M&A becomes better and becomes this superpower of DAOs, could you eventually start seeing a lot more consolidation? Could we eventually start to see protocol conglomerates? Questions? Or curious your thoughts on this narrative and what that could look like.
Yeah, I think it's not unlikely. If you also look at the traditional space or tech M&A space, how consolidation happened in the .com era, when a lot of people built similar things, and in the end, there were the leaders, established themselves and bought up smaller parties. And it's not unlikely to see this happening in a decentralized world, right? Because there are products that are replicated that we don't necessarily need 10 times, which doesn't mean the ecosystem gets less decentralized in essence, because that doesn't fundamentally or wouldn't necessarily fundamentally change the mechanism behind, but just a kind of market composition.
Jillian, last word.
We should see more deals. Let's do them. Do them in infrastructure. There's lots of places to do it. I love the idea of a big conglomerate.
Amazing. All right, let's make more deals. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.